Alrighty, it's snowing. Yesterday I never put on pants that weren't pajamas, and I didn't put on a pair of shoes. So it's best to do this all day today. I figured good to get out and do a little walking before it gets deep, and I'd have to put on shoes with laces. What a hassle. This morning I heard a story on, it's probably Morning Edition, I caught it through the NPR One app, but it's a story with a social worker, I guess, or a researcher who is studying social workers, and in particular she was studying the effects of foster care, particularly foster care where kids never really find a long-term place to stay and they get moved again and again, sometimes upwards of 100 times. And that there are long-term consequences in terms of brain development moving kids that often. And I think probably more than the physical moves is the removing them from a particular familial or living or social context where there's familiar people in their life. And the researcher who was being interviewed talked about how she would follow, ooh, ice, all right. When there's powdered snow on the ground, you think, oh, good footing. Not when you're walking over a frozen puddle. Anyway, the researcher would follow social workers into the homes, there's another puddle, of, people who are down and out, people who are long-term unemployed, abusing drugs, drinking, whatnot. And you go into a house and you see the squalor. You see all the dirt. You see the disorganization, the chaos, the fact that these folks just don't have their lives together and are probably in no position to be caring for kids. Well, what they do have is the biological, attachment, the love in the family that just comes from being the parents of these kids, even if they can't, balance a checkbook or hold down a job or resist the call of whatever, vice soothes their itch. They still love their kids. And this researcher, the story ended with the researcher making the audacious suggestion that, to keep a kid in foster care costs about $25,000 a year. What if you just gave that $25,000 to the loser parents who can't really keep shit together, but at least they love their kids? And that love for the kids and the stability of, the family members who aren't super transient like some foster parents and foster families, that would probably be a better use of that $25,000 per kid, rather than taking them out of their home, moving them, giving them basically unfixable long-term brain damage from their, an environment that doesn't really allow them to form lasting attachments to people. They followed these kids, and a lot of them, at age 18, their support is just done. The state is done with them. The foster parent says, okay, you got to go. A lot of times the first stop is a homeless shelter. And not long thereafter, in many cases, is jail. And eventually they end up basically just like their parents. So, that's not true for every kid in foster care, obviously. And it's not true that all foster parents are just venal and just doing it for the money. But at the same time, how many cases of foster care do you know where the kids, after the parents weren't getting the monthly stipend from the state anymore, go ahead and let the kids stay, or send them to college? I didn't move out of my house at age 18, from my mother's house. And, even long after I was gone, well into my 20s, I hadn't lived there forever. My room was still my room. And I knew that if anything, were to go catastrophically wrong, I could still go back there. My mother extends that offer to this day. It's a different house. It's her parents' house that she lives in now. The one I grew up in, belongs to somebody else. But, she repeats that offer, if things are absolutely, hitting rock bottom for you and you just can't afford to live the way you're living, you can come here. I'm 51. You know, kids, so much of, I think, our educational system, particularly at university, these days is designed to prolong childhood, to prolong the dependence of children, keep them out of the job market longer. You know, because a kid who's never applied for a job does not count as unemployed. Doesn't matter if he's 26. You know, if he's never lost a job, he's not unemployed. He, she, they, it. I guess it isn't really on the list. There's probably some weirdo who insists on it. Who insists on it. But anyway, we have cultural prejudices that I think, you know, at one time served a good function, which is we absolutely detest the idea of rewarding sloth, rewarding people who don't, you know, have it all buttoned down and are not going to work every day. And yet we'll spend outrageous amounts of money trying to force people who don't fit that mold into that mold. When you can take the exact same amount of money and get much better results, except, you know, it wouldn't flatter that particular prejudice, which again, I think at one time served a good function, but as we move further and further into, you know, the industrial and post-industrial age, that prejudice is increasingly dysfunctional. We need to get over it. And I say this as a parent who I'm concerned that my kids might not get any experience at work in their youth. I think they would be impoverished for never having had that experience. My oldest is 19, and he's never had a job. By the time I was his age, I'd had many jobs. You know, jobs where I was paying taxes. But it's also widely agreed that my generation, the conditions under which we were raised, counts as child abuse and neglect. Raised by wolves. That's the Gen X stereotype. It doesn't fit me. My mom didn't work when I was a kid. She was at home. And she didn't eat, you know, drink or smoke, or she had no particular vice. Raised Southern Baptist and never deviated. So, you know, I'm with the Gen Xers in a lot of ways, but particularly in terms of like elementary school and junior high school. When I got home from school, my mom was there. So I'm not quite the raised by wolves Gen Xer that, you know, a lot of my age cohorts are. Anyway, battery running low, gotta stop. Talk to you tomorrow.